back to The Secret Mind. Today we are continuing with Every Man an Enemy. Chapter 4. Here we go. We'll use that screen, I think. Chapter 4. Chapter 4, Every Man an Enemy. Every Man an Enemy. By W. Howard Baker. Architecturally, the building known as number 252 Baker Street was far from imposing. In period, it belonged to Victorian Empire, which, as students of these things well know, ranks second in gratuitous ugliness, only to Kilburn State Gaumont. Nor had its elevations been much improved by the attentions of countless generations of London starlings, sparrows and pigeons. These, and the torrential sulphur and soot-laden rains of 75 English summers, had left their indelible mark. Black coping stone was now white, white stone an ochreous yellow, red brick now a grimy black. All in all, the building known as number 252 Baker Street looked rather the worse for wear, and definitely passé. Coming to it for the first time, Harvey Innes could only shrug. From the outset, it looked almost as bad as his own place, which was saying something. And as for the lobby, the thick scrawled graffiti, evidence of much late-night loitering, made his eyes widen. Doris loves Johnny, he noted. And Johnny, another Johnny, or perhaps the same one, lusted after somebody else. Mabel, and a Paddington telephone number was thoughtfully appended, welcomed old and new friends for corrective treatment at her studio flat. Dr. X, Harvey learned, could be relied on to assist young ladies overwhelmed by disaster. Other messages, some of them rhymed, bordered on the vulgar and Saxon. Who did he say lived here? Harvey Innes wanted to know. Kirby hadn't said, yet. Nor, in fact, now did he need to. For just at that moment, Harvey caught sight of yet another legend scrawled low down on the wall. Sexton Blake lives here. He blinked. Strictly phonetic, that spelling, English at its most basic. Blake, he demanded of Kirby. Sexton Blake, is that right? Kirby nodded. He's always had rooms here, but now he owns the whole place. Some years back he bought it. It had only just come onto the market. He heard it was going to be pulled down and redeveloped. Not before time, said Harvey Innes, if you ask me. Oh, I don't know. Blake's had himself a very fine penthouse built on the top. He's let off the rest of the place. Kirby indicated the notice board near the lift, which listed the tenants of the various floors of the building. Pettigrew and Quince, Harvey Innes read. Loriners, QZ Enterprises Limited, Farfarol, and Dudley, Hong Kong, Potts, McKinley, Body and Potts, Bespoke Gunsmiths, Eastern Breezes, the Purfleet Shipping Company. Quite a little vignette of British industry, Kirby murmured, with Blake at the top. At the head of the board, Harvey Innes saw the name in chase lettering, S. Blake, Esquire. He said, I thought he'd left Baker Street years ago and gone to Berkeley Square. Just his offices, said Kirby. The ancient lift was rumbling and grumbling its way down the shaft from an upper floor. The headquarters of Sexton Blake Investigations is there, Kirby said, handling missing persons inquiries on an international scale, taking care of industry security at executive level, making claims investigations for insurance companies all over the world. He lifted his shoulders. You name it, Sexton Blake Investigations is probably involved in it somewhere. The lift had now reached them, reluctantly. Its iron gates rattled open. It swallowed them up. Querulously and complaining, it carried them skyward. Kirby said, Blake used to work out of Berkeley Square too, until he found himself becoming a little too much of the organisation man for his own liking. Now he lets the Berkeley Square end pretty well run itself and only professionally handles those jobs which particularly take his fancy. There, his eyes narrowed. Which makes me wonder, he said, just what John Bovis is coming to see him about. The lift had arrived at the top floor. It lurched to a halt. It must be something pretty important, mused Kirby. Otherwise Blake just wouldn't be wasting his time with it. How little you know, Splash. A new voice cut in on him suddenly. How little you know. Kirby came out of the lift in a hurry. Why, Blake! He exclaimed. Then he took in the tall, moustached figure standing beside the detective at the open door of the penthouse. And Mr. Bovis. Hello, Mr. Bovis, Harvey Innes said hurriedly. Mr. Bovis, said Kirby, you're just the man we wanted to see. He explained. Harvey and I followed you here from your office. Your secretary didn't know when you'd be back. To Blake he said, Harvey Innes is a literary agent. Is he indeed? One of Blake's Machiavellian eyebrows had climbed. How do you do, Mr. Innes? Then, don't tell me, he went on to the publisher standing beside him, that you're getting my old friend Kirby to write his memoirs too. Bovis looked from Blake to Kirby and back again. His face wore a good-humoured but lost expression, showing that he appreciated that this was some kind of joke, but that he couldn't share it. Blake understood at once. Oh, I see. You two haven't met before. It's Mr. Kirby, isn't it? Let me introduce you, Blake said. Arthur Kirby, John Bovis. And Kirby, you must understand, John, is the greatest gift to sensational journalism since Daniel Defoe. Splash Kirby modestly lowered his eyes. I'm sure he must be exaggerating. Not a bit of it, Blake insisted warmly. If you're willing to take chances, John, and run rather more than the usual risks, you could very well have a runaway bestseller on your hands here. Like that, eh? The man's story is loaded, Blake said. Loaded, and the scandal's my word, you'd get through 10 impressions in 20 days. I'll bear it in mind, John Bovis said, laughing. Kirby put in, looking at Blake. You said 2. I beg your pardon? You said that I might be writing my memoirs too, Kirby said craftily. Does that mean that you are? Blake shifted his feet a little uncomfortably. Well, John Bovis said, he's agreed to tell the story of some of his wartime experiences. It was my idea, and I just dropped by to tell him that I got official clearance on it this morning. Kirby looked cynical. So the pen is mightier than the magnifying glass, eh? You're only jealous, Blake told him equably. Just because you've never written anything longer than a column. And you have? This is news to me. Oh, Blake rejoined airily. I did do some pieces for the old Amalgamated Press before the war. So now, not content with hogging all of the limelight as a private detective, you're also going to force poor scribblers like me out of a job. Your job's safe enough. Maybe. But I could have written your memoirs for you. Kirby stopped as a thought occurred to him. And he grinned. He said, Anyway, if you set on invading my province, I'm going to have a crack at invading yours. You are. Sherlock Kirby is going into business any day now. Sherlock Kirby is in business already, the journalist retorted briskly. He's busy on the case of the missing author. Harvey Innes cringed as he heard the words. Bovis looked puzzled. Only Blake's expression did not change. How fun, he said good-humouredly. Let me know how you don't get on. And he was moving as he spoke. He shook Bovis's hand. Goodbye, John. Thanks for coming round. See you again. Sorry everything had to be so rushed, but I've got this other appointment. That's quite all right, Bovis said. I understand. Goodbye, Mr. Innes, said Blake. Goodbye, Splash. Hey, wait a minute, Kirby protested. This case that I'm working on, the missing author, don't you want to know all the details? I couldn't care less about the details, sorry, Blake told him cheerfully and nodded. Be seeing you, gentlemen. He went back into the penthouse. The door closed behind him. John Bovis, standing with cold suspicion dawning in his eyes, looked first at Harvey Innes, and, when the agent shifted his feet nervously and would not meet his gaze, he had his suspicions confirmed. Heavily, he said to Kirby, You'd better share those details with me. So you see, Kirby concluded, that's just the way that it was. They were in Kirby's car now, parked by the curb out in front of 252 Baker Street. Bovis and Harvey Innes were both in the back, and Kirby was slewed round at the wheel, half leaning over the seat, looking earnest. He had just finished relating the whole sad, sorry story. Outside the car, people went carelessly, callously by on the pavement, indifferent to Harvey Innes's utter dejection and acute misery. Traffic fumed and fretted, held up by the lights at the intersection. The world went on as it always had. Harvey Innes wished he could crawl away and hide himself somewhere. The corners of his mouth dropped. He was too close to John Bovis for comfort. John Bovis was looking very angry indeed. He was literally glaring at Harvey. His moustache was bristling with fury. He spat the words out like a terrible curse. "You could have told me." Harvey Innes croaked and swallowed. He could only croak. I, he began. Bovis's hands flashed, palms upwards, and for a moment Harvey Innes thought he was going to strike him. Then his voice came out in a bellow. "What am I supposed to do now? You know the book has gone to press. You know that the advance copies will be rolling off any time at all." "I didn't know that," said Harvey Innes weakly. I thought. Bovis's upper lip curled over the word. "Thought. Don't give me that. You know that the final contract is always a formality with me. I don't give any excuses. You could have told me. You ought to have told me how much capital I have invested in this. £10,000, that's how much. I haven't got so much money that I can afford to throw that much straight down the drain." "I know," Harvey began. "Well, if you knew, why didn't you do something about it?" John Bovis snarled. "Why did you let me go on? Why in heaven's name didn't you tell me?" Here, Kirby interrupted. He said swiftly, "I think Harvey wanted to tell you. I think he was going to tell you. It was just that he hoped there would be no need. Micawber-like. He was waiting for something to turn up. In this case, the missing author. Every day he was expecting MacDonald Hall to walk into his office and..." Kirby's voice died. Bovis wasn't listening to him. Bovis was talking to himself, smacking a fist into an open palm and muttering, "We've got to do something." But what? Kirby took a deep breath. "Mr. Bovis," he said, loudly, imperiously. "Mr. Bovis." Unwillingly, the publisher looked at him. "I'll tell you what we can do," Kirby said. "If only you'll listen." See you tomorrow.